So I just wanted to give a wee bit of an introduction to us. I'm conscious that a lot of people today will have engaged with us, which is great, but I was delighted to see lots of new names and faces today that we haven't quite connected with yet. So I just wanted to let you know a bit about Innovate UK KTN. We exist to connect innovators with new partners, academia, industry, RTOs, and we are very much here to support new opportunities and drive the acceleration of innovative ideas for economic growth. And we work across all sectors. So today you have representatives from the agri-food team in space. However, we have experts that straddle health, manufacturing, materials, all sorts of sector areas. Pedro, next slide, please. Thank you. So we are here today as part of the Agri-Food Africa Connect programme. Now, this is a 5-year-long programme. We're 4 years into this programme, and it's funded by Innovate UK and also the Global Challenges Research Fund. And the core aim of the programme is about bringing innovative people and organisations across the UK and Africa together, very much to address key agri-food challenges in Africa. And indeed, over the last 4 years, we've identified and focused on quite a few of those challenges. Next slide. Which is why we are here today. Pedro and I have been interested in this topic for quite some time. There's so much opportunity between the satellite space and African agriculture generally, but we're here today to share how satellite technologies and data can impact positively on African agriculture and indeed the challenges that we know about. So we're going to hear about innovative solutions. We're also importantly going to learn about some funding opportunities. We'll hear from Joanna Scales and Andy Bennett later on, specifically on these opportunities. And indeed, completely here to connect and collaborate. That is the purpose of today. Ideally, we want to make those connections and come up with some new innovative projects that we can support you with on the funding side of things. So again, on the collaboration side, at registration, you'll have the opportunity to opt in to appear in a collaboration document, which we will be issuing early next week, hopefully Monday or Tuesday. So that will be a really good opportunity for you to connect with interested people in this area and potentially create partnerships. But do feel free to use today to introduce yourself in the chat. And if we can just ask you to be quite clear about, your name, your organisation name, and also what you can offer partners and what expertise you need. That is very much what today's all about. So a wee bit about the agenda. We are running 3 sessions, and it's quite action-packed, and we are going to do our best to keep to time. But delighted to say that we'll be opening up with Catherine, who's going to do a wonderful overview of the opportunity, and we'll hear from Michael and Titus from an industry and indeed a sort of community point of view around the challenges and the potential. We'll then have a section on technology providers. We'll hear from them, and then a short break just to allow us to stretch our legs or get a hot water bottle or whatever we need in my case. And then agenda session 2, we'll hear from some innovative projects that have been funded and great examples of collaborations and case studies of people working together in this area. Funding opportunities, as I mentioned, Joanna and Andy will cover. And then session 3 will be all about interaction. So session 3, next slide, Pedro, please, will be very much about networking and collaborating. And we're going to have 3 sections, the first being the speaker breakout rooms. And we've assigned speakers per breakout room that you can go and ask specific questions or indeed discuss some topics and connect. The next themed breakout rooms will be 10 minutes, and you'll be able to go into whatever room you feel sort of is most appropriate or the area that you have of most interest. And then laterally we'll do some random breakout rooms to try and create those connections that you just wouldn't normally have. So the aim is to hopefully finish a wee bit earlier than scheduled. But as you can see, action-packed, we're really looking forward to it. And so thank you to all speakers and attendees for joining us. And without further ado, I am going to introduce you to our first speaker, Catherine Nakalembe, Africa Programme Director for NASA Harvest. Over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Debbie. It's an honor to be here today. Apologies, I'm not feeling so great, so I might cough a little bit, but I'm going to try and go really fast and stick to time. What I'm sort of going to give an overview of is Earth observations for machine learning and machine learning for agriculture monitoring, and with a focus on food security, which is the primary focus of my research and my work at NASA Harvest. And then I will end with some the basic use cases or applications that are really interesting for Africa, where there's a lot of potential that needs to be developed in terms of products and methods, among other things. If you go to the next slide, just to give a little bit of a background, is that food security is really critical. It's one of the most urgent, most unaddressed grand challenge of our time. We have millions of people that are food insecure, and when we think about food security, it's not only about food being available. It's beyond just food being available at the market. It also considers the availability of it, utilization of it, stability and access. So we're looking at the quality of the food and the fact that people can actually pay for it. So just food being available at the market, but people can buy it, does not equal food security. Go to the next slide. And in that context, we have at the end of, if you go to the next slide, thank you. At the end of 2021, according to this State of Food Security and Nutrition report in the world, we had over 828 million people that were affected by hunger, who were food insecure. And of those, approximately, I think 200 million were added to that number due to and around COVID. And so we have COVID conflict. If you think about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, that's gotten more people food insecure, and this is largely affecting countries in sub-Saharan Africa that depend on imports, for example. If you go to the next slide, in addition to the context, we have massive events that happen consistently. Go to the next slide. Things like Cyclone Idai from 2019 impacting large areas in Southern Africa. If you go to the next slide, the same year, 2019, we had a drought impacting agriculture in East Africa. These events were interconnected. The cyclone led to the drought in the Northeast. And this complexity, if you think about just the size of the area where these events were unfolding, the number of people that were impacted, require that we look with much broader eyes and have to be more proactive, have to have response programs planned for massive areas, as well as need early warning in order to be able to act and do something. And in other cases, it requires us to think about the extent in the future so we can address these problems, before they happen. If you go to the next slide, it's just to show an example from 2019, a sequence of events all happening, all impacting on communities that are already facing food insecurity, one after another. And this was before the COVID pandemic. If you might not remember, there was a locust invasion right at the beginning of 2020. So the combination of these types of events is pretty dire. And so on the next slide, it's just to kind of give, the basis and the focus of this is that we have a massive number of satellite systems, Earth observing systems that make it possible for us to really know what is happening in the world. And the next one is just that context of us being in a new era with machine learning, satellite Earth observations, and the power of the cloud. Next, yes. So with the combination of these three things together, and the massive impact on the number of people who can work on these problems, and the scale of problems that we can work on, the places that we can look at, we can develop methods, products, as well as tools that are relevant and really applicable and can support farmers across the world, and can reach farmers that were, historically excluded, like smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa. go next, it's just going to point out that even with those advances, data methods and models and tools, there is still a huge gap between those developments and impact. So there is, an excitement in the Earth observations, machine learning community to develop great models, but transitioning those to impact is still a huge, enormous gap. And, in that line, over in the next slide, I just wanted to kind of give a highlight. It's sort of the motivation for the NASA Harvest program, which is the one that I work under, NASA's Agricultural Security Program. It's led by the University of Maryland, and the goal is to develop methods, advance the adoption of Earth observations that benefit food security. We don't do this as purely by ourselves. We partner with multiple organizations around the world. And this is considered NASA's contribution to GeoGLAM, which is the Group on Earth Observations Global Agriculture Monitoring Initiative. And the image on the right is just to show you that, same satellites, same tools, same methods can be applicable in different contexts if you develop the tools specifically for that added context. And some of the things that we work on and might be interesting to and people on this call are interested in as well, if you go on the next slide, include things that farmers might want to know, but also what policymakers might want to know, looking at crop performance, understanding threats to production, trying to figure out when to intervene, how to intervene, when do you intervene, and how do you intervene with a particular problem, if it's a locust invasion, if it is a fall armyworm invasion. And so with these combinations of things, I show the crop calendar on the top right, just to show that at certain parts of the growing season, certain things have to happen. And if those things don't happen, then we have consequences down the line in terms of food produced. But then if a pest arrives at the middle of the season, then you have consequences in terms of reduced productivity. So we have to think about those things in the context of time and space in order for policymakers as well as farmers to have the information that they need the most. And so just a little bit about the Africa program priorities that I work on the next slide is, in the backdrop of all the information, technology, and tools that are available, focus is improving methods that allow us to monitor agriculture with Earth observations and machine learning. The first is, making sure that they are available in systems that people can access readily. Number two, I already spoke about around methods. Number three is capacity. So working with end user organizations, with universities, with ministries of agriculture to utilize our tools, to develop our tools much further, to make them relevant, as well as partnering with organizations that are working in this space to make sure that we're learning from each other as well as sharing the knowledge. And then we're doing that basically through the partnership version number 4. So on the next slide, next slide is just sort of give an overview, to contextualize what it is that I'm talking about. So satellite data, utilizing existing time series data sets, data collected over the long term, over many places, over extended periods, sometimes every week. In the case for Mondelēz, we have daily data that is aggregated into different chunks that we can utilize for monitoring and mapping, utilizing machine learning to extract information like cropland, crop type, crop conditions. And then we have other data sets like temperature, rainfall, combining those into interfaces where people can see and utilize what is in the system to understand what's actually unfolding. And then ultimately what we want is that it can inform policy, it can be useful for a farmer, but one important part is that a critical component in all this fancy technology is ground truthing, working on the farm level, collecting information at the ground level that then we can integrate further back down into our fancy models and applications that then translate into products in the future. So sort of, it doesn't work all on its own. It works with an integrated process that depends on field and input from experts on the ground as well. The next slide is just sort of an overview of some of the impact as well as the motivation for continuing to do this is that there's a huge uptake and interest in our tools. They're kind of direct pathways where end user organizations want to take part and be and utilize what we've had available. For example, in the top right, regional food balance sheet by Agra is utilizing now a yield model for aggregating and understanding production across different countries using the same data sets. In the top left is an example for the risk financing project in Uganda, providing early warning of the drought. Bottom right is an example of these crop monitors that we've developed that countries have adopted and utilizing internally using systems that are in the bottom middle, the GLAM system, for example, and other systems developed by, for example, the European Space Agency, that are critical for understanding crop conditions. So I'm going to end on a few slides just to kind of go backwards on, what methods and tools and applications we can develop. I've got about just 3 minutes, so I'll be really quick. Our work, or the work that primarily I've been talking about, is at that intersection of machine learning, so artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, combined with remote sensing, applying it to agriculture and food security. And so some of the products that we want to develop at the small scale, smallholder farmer context, African context is, for example, the first one, if you go to the next slide, is around crop mapping and crop type mapping. So crop mapping is binary classification, crop, non-crop. Top right, you can see orange means no crop, green means there is crop in this case. The bottom right is a crop type map, which is much harder to develop, especially if you're looking at smallholder agriculture. So you want to do, maize, beans, cassava, banana. If you've ever been to Uganda or are from Uganda, this is one of the most difficult landscapes to map because it's actually impossible in some cases because crops are grown together. And so how do you develop methods that can then be useful for understanding that kind of agriculture? The next is around field boundaries, which is a segmentation. We call it in other terminology for machine learning, where we're trying to segment out different field plots so we can know the boundary of a plot. So you know that there is maize, and this maize is in this particular field, and these are the conditions across that particular field, and this was the production from it, which is really, really important for doing area estimation and monitoring crop practices, and then implementing things like crop insurance. The next example is around pest, disease, and hotspot detection. Farmers suffer incredibly when their investment is wiped out by a disease. Things like fall armyworm or locust can eat everything in a particular field. So it's really important to try and develop methods to be able to detect these early and provide information early that can inform a farmer. And or if there is a way to address it early, that could be done. Only about a minute left. Around yield estimation, which is the next, is you want to know what production is across a really large area, so you can provide information on if there needs to be an intervention in terms of where do we need, for example, the irrigation. Just show a comment here. Someone was farming in irrigation. So if irrigation impacts on production in one region, could that be one intervention that could help production in another region? If you want to understand how much food will be available at the market at the end of the season, a yield map might be really, really critical, and a food balance sheet, for example, that I mentioned before. And there's some examples from our work. Next is a pipeline we've developed, which is open access, that you can utilize to develop cropland maps. And the next slide, just some example results from that, from multiple countries. And I'm going to end on, if you go next, Pedro. I'm going to end on the next one, which is, next slide, please. Just some consideration in the work that we have been doing. Go to the next slide. I can't see it yet, so. Oh, it's all gone. So, I just wanted to end on some considerations for things, is that it is important to consider the resource context. So while this technology is all really, really cool and interesting, you might have to invest in your partner to make it work. The other is infrastructure. So internet, things like cloud computing and downloading massive amounts of data sets require strong internet connectivity. So you have to consider that while you're developing some of the applications that will be discussed and we're talking about today. So thank you. I will do my best to stay on, but I'll probably be only on phone audio for a little while. Thank you.
Catherine, thank you so much. That was a wonderful overview, and it's very exciting, just the potential for this area, and just how there really, really is a great opportunity to create some massive impact for challenges that we see. I know that you can only stay for a while, so I think if there are any questions for Catherine, we can certainly follow them up. But thank you for joining us, and we'll now move on to next slide. Thank you. I'll make the introduction over to Michael Geary, who is Director, Cocoa R&D at Mondelēz. Over to you, Michael.
Can you hear me okay?
Can indeed.
Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thanks again, Debbie and Pedro, for the opportunity. It's as Catherine said, it's a privilege. So I've about 10 minutes, Debbie, have I?
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
so great. So yeah, wow. Tough to follow Catherine, but next slide. So my name is Mike Geary. I look after Cocoa R&D in Mondelēz. What that role involves is about how we farm cocoa right up to the factory door, and then how we process cocoa inside the factory door. So it's everything from what is the best planting material, what is the best agronomy, what is the best post-harvesting for particular environments, for particular farm types, looking to innovate there. And then in processing, of course, is how can we process cocoa, of course, to get the most out of it. It's a very precious crop. And of course, to give something that our consumers will want. A lot of people don't know Mondelēz, so just very briefly, we're a snacking business. That's how we define ourselves. We are predominantly, we're in biscuits and baked snacks and in chocolate, where we're either we kind of change around as number one or number two in the world on that. This is all public domain on our website information. So next slide, please, Pedro. We're a global business. We're as much a emerging as a developed market, revenue spread across North America, Europe, as well as Latin America, Africa, Middle East, Asia. And again, the majority of the revenue, half the revenue, is linked to biscuits and chocolate. Next slide, please. Here are some of the brands that, some of them are global. Hopefully most people in the left will recognize Oreo and Dairy Milk and Cliff, a new acquisition for us, Toblerone, Belvita. And then, of course, some on the right are some of what we call local jewels. And in the UK, that would be things like Tribord Basset. In Belgium, it's like Côte d'Or. And in Vietnam, it's Kindo. And Lacta is a Greek-Brazilian thing, Marabou, Sweden. Next slide, please, Pedro. Sustainability is hugely important to Mondelēz. It's hugely important for our consumers. I mean, we wouldn't be the growing business we are today if sustainability wasn't up front and center in our minds, and that wasn't visible to the consumers. And yes, we're doing it from a consumer perspective, but yes, we're doing it from a commercial perspective as well, in the sense that if we don't sustain the ingredients that are the heart of our business, then of course we don't have a sustainable business. Without cocoa, there is no chocolate. Without chocolate, to be honest, as you see, a third of our revenue disappears, as well as the whole of Oreo, very, very quickly. Mondelēz, with its strong background from Cadbury and Nabisco and many of the other legacy businesses that Mondelēz took over, was always very much driven, as people will know in the UK, by a social aspect. The Cadbury brothers in the UK were one of the first businesses to introduce holiday pay, sick pay, offer people, the opportunity for families to go to university. And that has constantly, that stayed with the business through the years. So where we're focused on in terms of our sustainability is around sourcing ingredients, human rights right across internal and in our supply chain, on the climate around CO2 emissions, and packaging. Next slide, please, Pedro. These are again some commitments that are in the public domain, or part of our snacking made right, which I have a link in the next slide. But what I'm talking about today is really about cocoa. And in cocoa, people may recognize Cocoa Life. It's our sustainability program within, in Mondelēz. Between now and 2030, we will invest over $1 billion. Our big targets here is that 100% of our cocoa for chocolate will be from Cocoa Life by 2025. And I think the previous slide said we're something like 80%. And that for us is basically, there is no child labor, It's deforestation free. It's committed to increasing the living income in the cocoa growing countries, while you know, we will not have a negative impact on the planet or biodiversity. Next slide, please. As we're here about Africa today, we source predominantly from 7 countries. 3 of those, Ghana, the Ivory Coast, and Nigeria, are based in Africa. Next slide, please. So cocoa farming won't be a surprise to anybody who's aware of it. And again, everything I'm saying here is part of the Snacking Raid right on our website. But anyone who's aware of it, you know, is it's smallholders. And I think with a lot of smallholder farms, full stop, it has many, many challenges. It's smallholders, you know, from a technology perspective, you know, the lack of access to funds in many cases stops you from putting in the technologies, which will allow you, of course, to improve your yields, which will allow you, of course, to improve your income, save you time, maybe diversify, and it becomes a very different vicious circle, and the planet gets caught in the middle. So low yields, people are motivated to increase the area. They expand, which often in the case of the tropics is deforestation, which of course contributes to climate change. Climate change brings some of the issues that Catherine talked about, changes in weather, increased pest and disease, which affects yields, and the circle continues. Next slide, please. In my own, in cocoa R&D within Mondelēz, we're taking a twin approach here to try and improving sustainability in cocoa in terms of technology. It's about, we're investing in a breeding program, superior varieties in terms of yield, resilience, quality, improve the genetic diversity. About agronomy, what's the best use of fertilizer, irrigation, shade, soil management, alternatives to pesticides, reduce chemicals, improve pollinators on farms, sequester carbon, reduce both the emissions and capture carbon. And that's basically everything I've said on the right. So I'm conscious I wanted to get to where I'm hoping people digest today. Pedro, next slide, please. So really, in order to really apply this level of more optimized water, light, shade, fertilizer, different levels of, you know, shade and other economic trees, we believe that one of the things that stops that degree of precision farming at scale, of course, is not having the tools. I'm saying everything that Catherine says. One of the big challenges we have across the huge number of smallholder farmers in any one of those African countries alone is that we can't quantify easily the quantity or the quality of that yield. We can't forecast yield easily, as Catherine mentioned. There isn't any tools to say, hey, watch out, there's going to be an outbreak of pest and disease because, i.e., we're forecasting weather, or i.e., we're seeing the first signs of pest and disease. What that stops us, of course, is no early warning, which means we have to blanket use chemicals as they're used today, rather than more targeted. And of course, it doesn't necessarily stop the outbreak. Cocoa, of course, a lot of nutritional issues with it. Farmers don't tend to apply fertilizers in many countries because they tend to be on virgin soils originally. Nutrient mining goes on. Of course, as nutrient mining, you know, the opportunity for that decreases over time. The soil is less and less fertile. The need for fertilizers becomes obvious. But again, to ask a farmer with limited access to funds and money to buy fertilizers, and without being able to direct that in a targeted way against where there's no nutritional issues, is a big risk. And that's putting all the risk with the farmer. Again, having a tool to be able to allow the farmer to make decisions on things. Will I or won't I buy fertilizer this year? And to what level do I need to apply it? And what type of fertilizer and how frequent would be massive, again, to improve productivity, both in terms of yield and reducing costs. Climate is changing in many of the countries. Water, access to water. the amount of rainfall, the frequency of rainfall is an issue. Yes, we need to have breeding programs on drought tolerance, but yes, we need to be able to predict when water issues are going to be a problem, both in terms of drought and flooding. And we need to be able to detect those early and guide teams across a massive landscape to where they may need to improve drainage, or they may to be able to do the opposite, improve irrigation, or bank up canals, apply mulching. We have an El Nino year this year in Indonesia. We had a La Nina year last year. This is a continuous need. Last one, there's a big push to plant lots and lots of trees for carbon across every industry, whether you're involved in cocoa or whether you're trying to offset. How are we going to monitor those carbon trees? How are we going to be able to, any companies, including us, be able to trace that tree back and say it lived, and I can claim the carbon? And we don't want to say if it lived. We want to follow it to make sure it doesn't die, and it needs to be nurtured and catered for. So being able to see cocoa and see its sister and brother shade trees and other commercial trees like plantain and banana and teak and coconut when it's intercropped or rubber is going to be, again, very important to be able to understand the inputs and to monitor the outputs and to pay people for those in a way, again, going towards recognizing improved performance, recognizing quality, and lifting the business. We see cocoa has been an orphan crop for years, unlike many, many other crops like almond or even wheat and those. If the analogy is going past landlines and going straight to mobile phone, then we're really, really keen to understand what that analogy would be for cocoa. Thank you for your time. We have plenty of problems to solve. Hopefully there'll be an opportunity for us to meet many of you and to understand whether the tools are out there to help us solve them across what is a massive area, both in terms of number of farmers as well as hectares. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Pedro.
Oh, Michael, brilliant. Thank you. And yes, thanks for the reach out there. I believe you'll be able to make the breakout session number 1. Hopefully you'll be able to connect with people who might feel that they've got solutions that they can speak to you about.
Yes.
But wonderful. And we appreciate that, small changes could the impact.
Massive.
You work 300,000 cocoa farmers, I believe. So it's
ballpark. And sorry, everyone. The most important one up there is word is almost affordable as well. But and there we go. And last one, my colleague Trevor Dogood-Ferrand is on the call as well. He's a digital specialist, so hopefully some of you will see him in some of the breakouts. But thank you again, Debbie.
Thank you so much. Okay. Now, wonderful. Handing over to Titus. Hopefully you're with us. I know you had slight connection problems, but I'd like to introduce Titus Letaapo, co-founder of the Indigenous Alliance and the Sarara Foundation.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie, and hi everyone. I'm sorry that I had some issues on the connection and also the link trying to connect. But my name is Titus Letaapo. I'm one of the co-founders of Indigenous People Alliance, and I also work with Sarara Foundation, which is an organization working with Indigenous people in northern part of Kenya. I am also a Samburu by tribe, a Samburu pastoralist. We keep livestock and we move from one point to another point. And livestock is our main livelihood. And we are cousins to the Maasais. So that's what I am. And next slide, please. Yeah, so as a community, maybe later on I'll mention on the challenges that we are facing as a tribe, an indigenous tribe in northern part of the country. We have been trying to develop some applications that are relevant, culturally relevant to the community, and one of them is called Lopa App. and LOPA app tries to combine the indigenous knowledge in observing the weather and the other observation data, so that the local community will be able to make decisions and also determine the weather which is coming maybe in future. The other one is called Namnyakap, and both of them, as I said, try to combine traditional knowledge of animal movement, location of stars, or maybe the direction of a wind, to try to make better decisions for better food security and also for climate action. So the two applications are still on development, although the main challenge is currently funding. So once they are finalized, so the community will be able to use them to make critical decisions. The county government of Samburu will also be owning the application, just to ensure that there is sustainability with the use of those applications. Just to give an example, the Namnyaka app will be combining three symbols other than combining words of animals or maybe physical features, and the community member will be able to understand maybe the location where he is and also communicate to any member of the community, or even the government. The county government will be able to locate where the community are in terms of service, in terms of providing the services, given the fact that most of the areas where we live are considered hard to reach areas. Next slide. Yeah, so as I said earlier, as indigenous communities in northern part of the country, we are faced with a lot of challenges. One of it being internet connectivity, which is very, very poor, or sometimes no connectivity in other areas. So accessing to world observation data within those areas are very difficult, sometimes even to government officials. The other big challenge that we have is a lack of funding for indigenous-led projects. You'll find that most of the projects that indigenous communities are leading, not necessarily within the Samburu community, but across the world, funding sometimes is a challenge, or accessing funding for that is a challenge. The other one is limited or lack of relevant government services. As I indicated earlier, most of the community areas are considered hard to reach, meaning that government services will not be able to be there. Road networks are very, very poor, or sometimes are not existing. So things like hospitals or dispensaries are not available. So that makes the government services and other even humanitarian agencies very hard to reach to the communities. The other one, which is also critical, is indigenous knowledge not being taken seriously. As I mentioned, as a community, we have our own ways of observing the weather, and they have been successful ways of determining whether drought is coming or calamities are coming. And through that knowledge, or those are community traditional ways of observing the weather and the skies, enables the leadership or the communities to make decisions on what to do, or even the direction of where the livestock or communities will be moving to. So you'll find that those knowledge are not being taken seriously. And as a community, we are trying to find ways of maybe even documenting those the traditional knowledge on Earth observation to make sure that we combine with the current science to help us mitigate climate change. And next slide. Yeah, and we have a lot of opportunities that can also help in to drive impact within the indigenous communities. One is to invest in communication, infrastructure, and public services. So there are a lot of opportunities where maybe the governments, either the national government or the county government, or even organization can help in improving communication in terms of infrastructure, improving roads, or even network services. So there are those opportunities where communities can or maybe governments can do. The other one is opportunities to fund indigenous-led projects and provide tailor-made solutions. For example, the projects that are being led by indigenous communities, not necessarily within Samburu community alone, but across Africa and the whole world. So there is that opportunity where organization can partner with the indigenous people to support programs that are led by indigenous communities. Also to include indigenous knowledge in climate change programs. So it's also very important that that one is an opportunity that can be used. And then also advocate for indigenous data sovereignty, making sure that there is that ownership in terms of data, so that the indigenous communities can be also owning the data. Yeah, so I think with that, maybe because of time, I say thank you very much for the opportunity.
And thank you so much for sharing that information. Really, really interesting. Lovely to hear specifically, from the Indigenous point of view, just how important some of these aspects, some of the real challenges that you experience. And I think hopefully events like this will just highlight the needs and specifically the funding requirements and things like that that are required to accelerate this area. Thanks once again. So we shall next move on. Thank you. We'll next move on to welcome, we're on to the sort of technology providers and solution providers section, and we shall welcome Andrew Carrel, President of Data and Services, AAC Clydespace. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Debbie. Hi, yes, I'm here speaking on behalf of AAC Clydespace. Let's go straight on into the next slide. This is just a 5-minute slot. So we're a very established technology company in the space sector, providing both space technology and also data. We're headquartered in Sweden, and we have over 170 staff worldwide. If we move straight on to the next slide, we have 6 sites around the world. Most of our staff are in Europe, as you can see. But in 2021, we decided to open a site in Cape Town, South Africa, really with 2 motivations in mind. Firstly, there's some fantastically talented people who we welcomed into the group, and that's really helped us expand our technology capability. So that's an important part of our motivation in opening the site there. But also it provides us with a base to serve the Africa community and the Africa market. And that's also an important part of our business strategy. So we can move straight on to the next slide. In terms of our business vision, really we're all about providing or helping space technology serve real world applications here on Earth. There are different vehicles to that. We are a technology provider of space products and components, and indeed entire space missions where people want to procure a space mission. And that can be procuring a space mission where we do the whole mission, or it can be a hybrid where we provide the know-how and some of the technology components to enable a partner in country in their home country to develop a mission. And we have done that previously in a program in Mauritius, actually. We also provide space data as a service, which is the focus of this next slide, where we own and operate satellite constellations to provide data directly as a service. And our focus there is really providing targeted data at certain sectors at a really affordable cost. And obviously, one of those areas, farming and forestry, particularly through the provision of optical Earth observation data, is the relevant one today. And we can go straight on to the next slide, where an example of that that's very relevant at the moment is where we're providing data from a constellation of satellites to Canadian company Wyvern with our Epic View platform, which you can see on the right. And in this context, what's particularly interesting is whilst the platform is something that's been manufactured in Europe, the payload has been provided by SamiraSense, who are a South African company. So that's another example of it very much being a two-way technology street between Africa and Europe for our business. In this case, the payload is coming from Cape Town, not from our site in Cape Town, but from SamiraSense, a neighbouring technology partner who we're very pleased to work with. This technology will provide hyperspectral imagery, which it sort of complements the other data sources that are available on the market and provides additional spectral content, which is particularly useful in the agriculture context to help understand crop health, soil nutrient health, and so forth, which are very relevant in a lot of the contexts that have been discussed about monitoring agriculture from space, I think particularly from the opening presentation that we had. If we can move on to the next slide. As we've heard earlier, agriculture is hugely important in Africa. It's a huge important part of the economy in terms of employment. And looking at some of the economic potential projections for how Earth observation can benefit Africa, the lead benefit is clearly that agriculture performance can be improved through the data. And we've seen some examples presented already of how that can happen through the data that Earth observation provides by improving outcomes in terms of yields, improving security in terms of avoiding failed crops and so forth. But also there is the opportunity to grow the Earth observation industry within Africa, and that's another opportunity for economic growth. And there are estimates at the bottom from the World Economic Forum here as to what the benefits both of those could bring to the African economy. We, as both a technology provider to help grow the in-country capability within Africa, within African countries, and also as a data provider of Earth observation data to the agriculture sector, we're looking to contribute to both, and we're very pleased to have a site in Cape Town, Africa, to be able to act as a vehicle to enable both of those things. Okay, hopefully I've kept to my 5-minute slot, and I will say thank you there, and I'll be in breakout room 2 after this.
Thank you, Andrew. That was brilliant. I'd lovely to see the commitment in Africa. Also loved hearing the affordable data cost, which I'm sure quite a few people will want to speak to you about. So thanks very much for that. And we'll move on to our next speaker. Can I introduce you to Michael Breetzke, Director of Business Development at Swift Geospatial.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Debbie. And nice to meet everyone, albeit remotely. My name is Michael Breetzke. I am one of the directors and business development manager here at Swift Geospatial. Swift Geospatial is a remote sensing and GIS company based in South Africa, with the main goal of transforming the data into knowledge. So taking kind of the data that was spoken about earlier and putting that into information. So something as simple as green, good, and red, bad. Next slide, please, Petra. Swift is still a baby company. We are into our 7th year now, so August will be our 7th year. And this is just the kind of the journey of the company from inception in 2016 to where we are now. The important things that we'd like to establish here is partnerships. So for us, it's very important in order to establish partnerships. You can't do everything by yourself, and that's why this event is so important to us. So we are Esri partners, and then we have a whole host of satellite partners. So ranging from Maxar to Planet, to Clydespace, and to Wyvern. Actually, that was mentioned in the previous one, and we're really looking forward to that hyperspectral imagery, because that is kind of like the next frontier that we see, particularly into forestry and in agriculture. And where we're seeing a big shift into movement, particularly for the services that we offer, is almost in the last year or 2 years into sustainability, ESG monitoring. Next slide, please, Petra. And that's where we are now. So at Swift, we primarily create monitoring solutions, monitoring systems, focusing on forestry. So both commercial forestry, so that'd be your timber, plantations or paper and pulp, to deforestation requirements around the globe. We do a lot of work in agriculture in Africa, mining, and like I said, a big push into sustainability. So is harvesting of cocoa or coffee done in a sustainable way, traceability, those type of projects. But what we're talking about today is focusing kind of primarily on the agriculture and sustainability stage. And everything that we'd like to do kind of has to start with a workflow, right? Because we want to measure, analyze, and monitor and verify what we're doing. So for stage number one, it's really, really important that we get the spatial data. So next slide there, Pedro. And when we're talking about spatial data, we're talking about what to monitor where. So in an African context, generally, we're talking about small scale, small woodlots, right? Whether that be for forestry or whether that be for agriculture. We're not really looking at massive pivot fields or anything along those lines. So it's vitally important that we get to know where these areas are that we want to monitor, because we can't just be given a large area. We need to go down to a field level or region level or district level in order to provide that type of information. So number one for us is always to create the best data. And then we move over to the second step of selecting what sensors will work best. So in this case, we use various tools like Collector or Survey in order to map the fields of interest. Thanks, Petra. Once we know where the fields are, it's also important to decide on what type of satellite information to use coming down from the top, right? And over here, we've got a whole heap. You can go to your Sentinel or your Doves, your Maxar, but it's important to ascertain what will give you the best information at an affordable price. So our solution has always been, why use one or the other if you can provide a data fusion of all sensors combining into one to create a nice monitoring platform. And once again, in Africa, we've seen a bigger shift away from a Sentinel platform more into a Planet platform, because Planet collects daily imagery and it's at a higher resolution. So we can see the smaller fields and provide that type of information for our clients. Thanks, Pedro. And then from there, really, you can click the next slide as well, Pedro. There's a bit of a moving animation here. It's to create that kind of baseline of the fields and to monitor that through time at a given frequency, daily, weekly, monthly. But ultimately, we want to take all of that heavy lifting of satellite information and provide decision support for our end clients. Create the baseline, and once you've got that baseline, monitor it moving forward for whatever aspects you are looking to do. So whether that just be a simple NDVI, which you can use for some type of infield stress or water management for particular crops or harvesting, it's really up to the end user. But it's all driven from various types of different satellite technology. Next picture. And then when we've seen the biggest enhancement in technology isn't necessarily the imagery that's coming down from space, albeit incredible, and we're looking forward to hyperspectral, but we're seeing how you deliver that information to the end client in a user-friendly environment. So we pride ourselves in putting all of that hard work into platforms, online dashboards, web applications, mobile applications, that everybody can get access to the data, no matter who you are, and importantly, no matter your level of knowledge or level of expertise. You don't need to be a remote sensing expert to understand red, bad, green, good. So it's about taking that heavy lifting and putting it into a platform that is easy to consume. And I think I've just got two examples here that we've done. So next one, Pedro. So one example here is for an agricultural company based in South Africa, but now doing work throughout Africa. The premise here is just to understand crop up, crop down, any type of infield stress, monitoring of the crops, harvesting, predicting when harvesting is going to occur so that they can plan logistics in and around that. So that's just straightforward agriculture. And then the next example, Pedro, is an example that we're doing with a company called Barry Callebout, where we're monitoring all of their sources of their cocoa around the globe. So similar to what Mike Geary was saying earlier, in this case, we're monitoring for kind of deforestation events in and around the farmer fields, and then monitor that over time. And then with that, it starts to open up a whole lot of other questions of, was that deforestation due to the farmer or not? And that's the next phase of the project that we're going into. But none of this would be possible without the satellite imagery coming in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. That was excellent. very technical detail, but brilliant how you sort of explained that, you don't have to be an expert in terms of the reporting and it can all be very understandable. And I'm learning so much here, so thank you for that. And we're going to move on to our final speaker for this slot before the break. I'm going to welcome Yiorgos Gadanakis, and I don't know if I did your name justice there.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction, Debbie, and also for the invitation. So my name is Yiorgos Gadanakis, and I'm Associate Professor in the School of Agriculture, Policy and Development at the University of Reading. So what I'm talking about is, and it's following actually from the previous presentation, is about continuous and systematic monitoring of agricultural land for sustainable development. And I'm representing also here AgroApps, who is a partner that we have been working over the past few years in a number of EU-funded projects. And what I'm going to focus here is about Envision and how the services that we have developed can be linked to an Africa context, but also to demonstrate and highlight some of the projects that AgroApps has worked and collaborated in Africa. So if we move to the next slide, please. So the team, so both University of Reading and also AgroApps and also the other partners that they are participating in the Envision, and especially the National Observatory of Athens, what we do is we are promoting solutions for sustainable agriculture. And by that, what we do is that we actually co-produce solutions. So we highlight the importance of co-production of services for farmers and for stakeholders. And that's why we are engaging with Earth observation service developers, experts, and relevant stakeholders in order to co-produce the solutions that will be then uploaded in a platform which will serve the needs for the continuous monitoring, as it was highlighted earlier, of the environmental practices. So what we do is we actually use open satellite data and our empirical knowledge on the spot in order to integrate them in solutions for the whole agricultural system in order to serve for the Envision, but also for other governmental authorities, as it is the the Common Agricultural Policy, but also certification bodies and assurance schemes, in order to serve the continuous monitoring of compliance in terms of policies and standards. In addition, we have generated a number of agricultural extension services, which are provided in a tailored framework, in a tailored app for the farmer, which has been designed via an active engagement. And the overall objective of those solutions is, first of all, to make the administration process effective and efficient and fair for the farmer, but also cost efficient on both sides. So if we move to the next slide, please. So the Envision was designed or was inspired in order to tackle some specific challenges for the Common Agricultural Policy and, let's say, the European context. However, that is not only relevant for the focus that we had in the Envision. This is relevant for other countries around the world, and especially developing economies, and especially as well Africa. So therefore, so far, what was happening in terms of inspection or in terms of monitoring of the environmental practices or the good agriculture practices on the field, you could only do that via snapshot. So you could only either do it with some satellite images on a picture of time, or by actually visiting the field. So we offer something which is continuous in terms of monitoring. We needed to address cultural differences, and that is also relevant for the Africa context. We need to provide evidence. There is a large number of sustainability priorities that we will need to address. And of course, there are some significant organizational and structural differences amongst countries. So therefore, this is time consuming and costly. So if we move to the next slide, please. So we need to have a complete system rethink. And if we move to the next slide, which will integrate those services in providing for the farmers and for the paying agencies some personalized decision support services, which can, from the perspective of the farmer, boost the farm productivity and profitability, and therefore enable effective and sustainable use of resources. to also from the side of the paying agency to reduce any operational and administrative costs or any other governmental authority, and therefore to enable the continuous monitoring by using Earth observation data. And that would make the whole system transparent around the sustainable practices employed. If we move to the next slide, please. So the AgroApps has a footprint in Africa. So there are a number of projects that AgroApps has participated. And what they have done there is to develop some early warning systems that they are supporting decision-making in the field of food security, which is quite important in case of Africa. Flood early warning systems, some reservoir management and crop germination insurance services, support and enhance climate change impact analysis on agriculture by the use of Earth observation data, and also finally some drought early warning systems which are supporting farmers and governments in managing this. And that's the last slide. Thank you very much, and I hope I've done well in terms of keeping time. 5 minutes is very short. Thank you.
Thank you, Yiorgos. I know it is really short, and there was an awful lot of fantastic information there. Just sort of like to highlight again that at the end in our networking and collaborating session, you know, the audience can meet with yourself, with the various presenters. So maybe some direct questions can happen then. But that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are now going to have stretch the legs, coffee press. Oh, perfect. We've done it already. Okay. Right. Well, hope that gave you a bit of a stretch and re-energize for the next session. Welcome back, everybody. I would now like to introduce you to John West from Rothamsted Research, Protecting Crops and the Environment Group. Over to you, John.
Thanks very much, Debbie. Hopefully you can see and hear me. So my name's John West from Rothamsted Research, but I'm talking about the ARES project, which was led by Samir Singh of Rail Vision. And Samir unfortunately couldn't be here today. They have great expertise in optical sensing, which they use for railway line inspection and clearing of vegetation as well around railway tracks. But they've also adapted some of that technology for agriculture. And also on the project, we had Certis, who have a fantastic kind of non-toxic chemical solution to cocoa swollen shoot virus by controlling the mealybug insect vectors. And we had Positive Agro, an extension company in Ghana that used drones and light aircraft for imagery. Okay, so next slide, please. So the purpose of the project was to develop a fusion of imaging techniques from satellites and drones to estimate locations of cocoa swollen shoot virus, and also to look at other aspects of cocoa health and develop a way to predict risky locations where Certis's solution could be targeted better. So that involved artificial intelligence, of course, and use of drone imagery was considered to be better than what we could get from satellite imagery because of the improved resolution. So the Rail Vision developed a fantastic desktop system and database to interrogate images, but at the same time as taking the images from drones, we also collected airborne spores of other pathogens, mainly fungal diseases of different crops, that we could test for to add value to the drone flights. Next slide, please, Pedro. So keeping with the optical sensing part, a whole range of different methods were developed to allow the data to be processed and fused into a database so that individual tiles or images of the canopy could be analysed and classified for the percentage area of cocoa, other vegetation, and other features like water, roads or buildings, and bare land. So it was possible to spot deforestation, for example, and a whole group of those images could be also looked at collectively to estimate percentage area of vegetation and so on. So that was a fantastic resource that can be adapted for a whole lot of other purposes as well in the future. Next slide, please. So for the spore detection work, we developed a very, very low-tech system to add some plastic strips to the drone, and the forward momentum of the drone causes impaction of the spores onto a sticky surface on those strips. Back down on the ground, the user can then quickly extract the DNA from those spores just by simple disruption with ball bearings being shaken in a liquid, and a few drops of that liquid is added to some freeze-dried reagents that we provided in packs, and that just gets put in a simple heater and left, so that a simple color change can then be used to differentiate whether the spores were present or not. So that was used to detect spores of a fungus called Lasiodiplodia, which affects citrus and cocoa and lots of other fruit. So this was just a proof of principle to show that we could detect a certain disease. Next slide, please. So just returning to the optical sensing component, Royal Vision developed a fantastic way to really process huge amounts of data very, very quickly to a server, where it could be presented in a user-friendly dashboard, and that, as I said, could be adapted for a whole lot of other purposes. Certainly, it was shown to be very useful to add precision to where to apply Certis's solution to control the mealybug vector of cocoa swollen shoot virus. So Royal Vision have plans to be able to use this system for other things, and if you want to contact Royal Vision, you can do so through me. My email address is on the screen, john.west@rothamsted.ac.uk. Thanks very much for your attention.
Oh, thank you so much, John. That was absolutely brilliant. Really interesting. I'm quite sure actually Michael and Trevor from Mondelēz will be interested in some of what you just spoke about there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, analysing of airborne spores, fantastic, early detection. Thank you. We will now move on to hear about collaboration at its best. So I'd like to introduce Robin Sampson, Managing Director of Trade and Space, and Mona Philippon, who is representing Sucafina today. Over to you, thank you.
Thanks very much for that intro, Debbie, and hello everyone. It's a real pleasure to join this morning and say a few words about the work that we've done at Trade and Space with our partners at Sucafina in this work. And let me just say, first of all, Trade and Space provide satellite generated insights for agricultural commodity trading businesses. And I'm really pleased that Mona has joined us from Sucafina, who can tell you a lot more about the impact that our technology has been having on coffee supply chains in East Africa. We first started to work with Sucafina back in 2019 on coffee crop detection models, a little bit like the one that you can see in this image. But since then, we broadened the scope of that relationship to also support Sucafina's ambition to have a more sustainable coffee supply chain and improve and capture sustainability metrics of that chain. Anyway, time's a little short this morning, so without any further delay, let me introduce Mona Philippon to describe the work that she led on with Sucafina in East Africa. Thanks very much. Next slide, please.
Thanks a lot, Robin, and hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Mona, as it's been mentioned. I'm a green coffee merchant for Sucafina, and I've been based in East Africa working for Sucafina Group for almost 4 years now, and I'm currently based in Uganda. And during those 4 years, I've been wearing a lot of different hats, including working on such projects. You can stay on this slide. So very quickly on Sucafina, it's the leading sustainable farm-to-roaster coffee company, and it has a family tradition in commodities that stretches all the way back to 1905. And today, with over 1,400 employees spread across 34 countries, we help stakeholders worldwide to find hopefully the perfect coffee solution. And so to do that, we embed technology, innovation, and sustainability throughout the supply chain by creating shared value for all of for everyone along the supply chain by investing in farmers, caring for people, and protecting our planet. And so in efforts to meet these 3 important pillars for us, we have designed our own certification called Impact, within which reducing deforestation is a key area. And before I go a little bit more into detail as to why this is a key area, I'm just going to set some background, even though I'm very sure it's not necessary considering the crowd we have here. Pedro, you can move to the next slide. Thank you. So it's obviously no secret that forests play a critical role in mitigating climate change and the loss of biodiversity. And it's also no secret that it's a big driver of deforestation is the expansion of agricultural land, which is linked to the production of commodities such as soy, beef, palm, cocoa, and coffee. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change estimated that about 23% of the total greenhouse gas emissions overall between 2007 and 2016 came from the agriculture and other land uses. And out of this 23%, about 11% of it comes from agricultural land use. And obviously mostly deforestation. And that is why, as a green coffee trading company, we are very much invested in deforestation, and that is why it is crucial for us to work on mitigating the impact of deforestation to our ability to address the climate change and ensure a sustainable and secure coffee supply chain. And you can move to the next slide, Pedro. So as I said, there's this internal certification that we have created called Impact, and it includes 5 impact, hence the name areas, as I already said, including reducing deforestation. In order to do that, and we can move to the next slide, we have an approach that is basically in 3 tiers. So the first one was to map our supply chain. And I'm going to explain in a little bit more detail what we did for that. We also had to conduct deforestation risk assessment, and that's where Clydespace came in very handy. And last but not least, we also had to mitigate deforestation and forest degradation risks. So we have started implementing this approach in different East African countries where Sucafina operates, and that is in Rwanda and Burundi and Kenya and in Uganda. And we can move. Perfect. So how did we map our supply chain? So we used the digital tool and visited a lot of farmers that we work with. So we basically solicited a huge team, over 100 people, to go to the field and visit the farmers and mostly their farms. And instead of collecting just GPS points, we wanted to collect polygon maps of the farms. And so that's what we did. And we visited over 150,000 farmers so far from our direct supply chain. And still ongoing exercise, but yeah, it's already quite a lot of data point, and it's no secret, I'm sure for most of you, that high quality data or good quality data is difficult to collect, especially in this context and with that many farmers. It's also quite time consuming, as you can imagine, and very costly. So yeah, it's a lot of challenges that we had to take on, but obviously very useful and very necessary. And I'm happy to discuss afterwards about how we try to tackle these challenges. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. So the next step after mapping our supply chain and collecting all of this data digitally, we have pushed this data onto Clydespace. So with the help of Clydespace, we have been able to design a tool that is tailored for coffee. And I'm sure Robin will be able to say a lot more about that later on, but this technology uses Global Forest Watch Pro datasets to help us assess deforestation risks within our supply chain. And what you can see here on the video is an example of actual data that is currently on Clydespace from our supply chain in Uganda. And you can see the different filters and different way to tailor the screen to understand a little bit more what is happening in terms of deforestation. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. So even though geospatial data is incredibly important and we could not be able to map the deforestation within our supply chain without a tool like Clydespace, it is also super important for us to conduct a ground assessment. And that is because we need to be able to understand on the ground what is actually happening and what are the reason for this deforestation, and is it actually commodity driven or not. Either way, this issue is still an issue, but the solution will be largely different. So that is something that we are doing as well. So we are, after going to the field to map the supply chain, we then do the assessment and then go back to the ground and try to understand what is happening, obviously only to the farms that are flagged as a risk for deforestation. So last but not least of our approach, as I said earlier, is the mitigation of deforestation and forest degradation risks. So aside from raising awareness amongst the concerned stakeholders, mainly the farmers, via education sessions and trainings, which is of course one of the crucial part of preventing deforestation, we also have a promotion. We also promote good agricultural practices, which ensures efficient and environmentally sound farming, but also increases productivity and profitability of existing land without encroaching into the forests. And that is a very important point, because it is crucial that the farmers not only get penalized by these measures, but that they actually benefit from it. And another way of putting measures in place, but also try to benefit the farmers, is by doing intercropping. So we developed an agroforestry model, or different agroforestry models for farmers, by doing intercropping with coffee and obviously other trees on the same land where it is possible. And that would increase the carbon storage, biodiversity, and nutrient cycling, which is very important, especially in East Africa, and especially in Rwanda and Burundi, where the soils have been decreasing in quality year on year. It would also lower the air temperatures and higher soil moisture, which of course is also very useful, especially again in East Africa, where the rain patterns have been largely affected by climate change and therefore impacting the harvest yields, and to provide an alternative farmer to not an alternative farmer, an alternative income to the farmer. And again, that is because it is super important that farmers don't get penalized and on the contrary actually benefit from these measures. Olga, you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Pedro. So for example, in Rwanda, what we have done so far is that we have provided 2,500 farmers with training on agroforestry practices, on gender and farming as a business. And we have given them, provided them with the material and the training to plant 30,000 trees and set up 10 demonstration gardens to showcase the best practices and to trial innovative approaches to farming. And we have also distributed organic fertilizers to some farmers. Obviously, this is the beginning. We're still working on developing this across in Uganda and across the different countries where we are operating. And because each country has different regulations and different realities, basically, the team based in each different producing countries has adapted, tailored slightly the 3 pillars and the approach of mapping our supply chain, of assessing the deforestation risks and mitigating them by fine-tuning it and and fitting it to origins ground reality, basically. And that is it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Robin and Mona. That's brilliant and just so clear that there is commitment required for support on the ground, be it training, for picking up the on the ground data and integrating it with all the technology that's out there. But you can see that it's worth it and it's worth that investment. So thank you for demonstrating that. That was really, really useful. We shall now move on to hear from Henry Mibei, Manager Digital Development of CABI Africa.
Thank you very much, Debbie, and also Pedro, for having CABI in this important event. My name is Henry Mibei, and I work for CABI. I sit at CABI Africa office. And at CABI, we do have 100 years of experience in the areas of agriculture and soil environment. And in this presentation, what I want to do is present one of our innovative solutions where we are using satellite and weather data to forecast pest risk and also offer advisories to farmers. Next slide, Pedro. So the problem that we are addressing is pest and disease. We know that FAO notes that on an annual basis, 40% of crop or annual crop production is lost to pest and disease. And mainly the sub-Saharan Africa is the countries that are affected, and this is because of climate change. And you'll find that the major pests affecting crops include fall armyworm in maize. We have Tuta absoluta. Those are emerging pests that really affect production of crops. And most of the farmers grow different maize or different crops. And for those crops, you'll find some of those crops have pests that farmers are struggling to really manage. Next slide, Pedro. So the solution that we have developed at CABI in partnership with Asimila and other institutions is an early warning or forecast system, and it's called PRICE, Pest Risk Information Service. So this is an early warning system that forecasts the risk of pest outbreaks. And this came from a project. It was funded by the UK Space Agency. It was a 5-year project. We started in the year 2017-18. This system or service was developed for Kenya, Ghana, Zambia, and Malawi. And what we did, or what we are doing, is we are combining Earth observation and weather data, and also with pest risk models, where we bring different data sets and predict the likelihood of a pest occurring based on the planting date of a crop. So, for example, if a farmer planted maize this season, maybe in February, we're able to predict the likelihood of a pest, maybe fall armyworm happening, and then we provide intervention where farmers are able to manage or take action so that they can prevent or manage that pest. So the models give the optimum time to apply intervention for maximum kill of early stage of pest. And this service or the PRICE service, it's designed for farmers to take action. So we not only provide an intervention window, but we combine this time with advisory service so that farmers are able to take action where they're able to manage that pest. So we implemented PRICE service with Asimila. I think we have Andy attending this event. And we also have in-country partners in the countries where we work with dissemination partners and also research institutions in the countries where we work. Next slide. So I would like to focus here to explain how the overall system, because I mentioned we have the service as price, but now the back end or the system itself, how this price works. So if you look at the left side, that is the part where we have a data cube, where we now bring in different data sets. We integrate other observation data, derived satellite data. We also have weather data, and also plant vegetation cover, including a life cycle data. And then we do model and also come up with pests or the risks now that we combine with alerts and give it to farmers. So on the right side, you'll see the endpoint as the farmer, where they will be receiving the alerts. So the left side is where we do the modeling, but the right side is the part where farmers receive their advisories. And we do have different mechanisms where we now disseminate these alerts to the farmers, and also do a feedback mechanism. We collect feedback from the farmers so that we keep improving these alerts or the advisories, and also doing analysis in terms of how actionable or how if the farmers are benefiting from these alerts. Next slide. Now, some of the pests or crops that we target, we do have in the 4 countries. We are focused on maize, beans, tomatoes, and for the pests that we work with research institutions, so that we prioritize on pests that affect crop majorly production. So in this, if I focus, for example, in Kenya, you'll find that the heat map that is shown in the left side, the Kenya, is that when we do prediction, it's based on the planting time of a crop. So you'll find that due to, because of, in some areas, it's cold or hot. So you'll find that based on the planting time of a crop, when we now do the model, you'll find that in cooler areas, it will take time maybe for a pest to occur. But in hotter areas, because of temperatures and also rainfall, you'll find that in hotter areas, maybe the likelihood of a pest occurring will be, the days will be shorter and longer in cooler areas. So this heat map, it helps to show how farmers are able to predict or get to know if a pest is likely to happen in an area. And we do this based on location. So when we are sending alerts, we customize based on the regions. And next slide. Now, how do we then disseminate these alerts? Because we have now done the modeling, we have predicted the likelihood of a pest occurring. How then do we reach farmers or communicate this to farmers? So what we do is that we leverage institutions or organizations that have or work with farmers that has platforms. So in the 4 countries I mentioned, for example, Kenya, we're working with the Ministry of Agriculture, including the Carrel, the Kenya Agricultural Livestock Organization, where we have an MOU with them to disseminate these advisories to farmers. We also leverage some of our extension service through our programs. For example, the Plant-Wise program, where we have set up plant clinics or plant doctors who work with farmers, and these plant doctors give them advice. So we leverage different mechanisms to disseminate these alerts. And these alerts, we would have turned them into advisories so that farmers can take advice, or they are friendly to the farmers. Next slide. Now, in terms of the benefits of price, is that having worked in the 4 countries, we have reached close to 1.8 million farmers. But of course, based on the baseline or endline surveys that we have done, we have seen benefits in terms of economic sustainability and also delivery of in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals. So, for example, in 2019-2020, we did a survey, and we found out that when we integrated the price alerts to one of the government service, At the end of the season, we realized that 59% of the farmers who received the alerts changed their practice. And they noted that the recommendations that we gave them, for example, when they were managing fall armyworm that is affecting maize, they found that the most common outcomes are they were able to reduce the population of the pest or the fall armyworm in maize. And also in 2020-2021 rain season, we noted that 87% of the maize farmers we surveyed believe that the recommendation that they got from price was correct. So we see that there's value in using the price alerts in terms of economic, where there's increased productivity, and also sustainability in terms of the better pest management, and also delivery of SDG goals. So what we are looking is to expand price to other countries and also scaling price. And in terms of sustainability, what we are looking at is developing other services. Now we have outputs in terms of data, and this can be leveraged by other private companies, where it can be combined with insurance for pest predicting insurance. So we have outputs that can help even other institutions. So we seek collaboration, and also we seek funding to expand to other countries. Next slide. Yeah, I think that's my last slide. We acknowledge the Geospatial agency for funding this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. That was excellent, brilliant, comprehensive run through of the prize system, and really interesting just in terms of the messaging channels, the reach and the impact. So thank you for that. We are now going to move on to the funding opportunity section of the morning, and I would now like to introduce you to Joanna Scales, who actually leads on the Agri-Food Africa Connect programme. Over to you, Joanna.
Brilliant. Thanks, Debbie. And yeah, thanks to all of this morning's speakers. What an interesting set of talks so far. So I'd just like to take a moment to tell you about an open funding call, which is very relevant to today's event. And hopefully that'll be interesting to think about as you enter into the breakout rooms coming up now. So this is the 6th round of Innovation Awards delivered as part of Agri-Food Africa Connect. And so far through this programme, over 70 projects have been funded, involving around 130 unique partners spread broadly throughout Africa and the UK. We'll chuck a link in the chat now where you can learn more about the projects funded to date, but it's already a really interesting portfolio of projects. So round 6 of this competition will fund collaborative projects between a UK and an African partner looking to address African agri-food challenges. The projects themselves must be a defined piece of research or innovation work, and they can be focused on any agri-food area, so from sort of farm to fork, on crops, livestock, aquaculture or food. However, there are 4 priority areas for this round of the competition, which will be prioritised in the review process. Earth observation is one of those, and the others are crop loss due to birds, soil health and crop nutrition, and livestock production. The projects must be led by a UK registered business, charity or research organisation, and they must be working alongside a partner organisation based in an African country. And one of those partners must be a registered business. The awards themselves, were you successful, would be up to £30,000 of funding for 5-month innovation projects, which would begin in September this year and end by 30th of January next year. So to find out more about the Innovation Awards and apply, please do take a look at the awards page on the Innovate UK KTN website. Again, our helpful colleague will add a link to that to the chat now. And to apply, you'll need to complete an online application form and email your case for support template, which will outline your project partners, the activities of your project, and also your budget. The deadline for those applications to come in is the 4th of August at 11 AM UK time. So there is plenty of time to get an application together now and identify partners to apply with. If you are looking for partners, obviously the breakout rooms now are a good opportunity, but we also have a LinkedIn group where you can post explaining about your project, your idea, your organisation, and really what you're looking for in a partner. And it's a good place to make a new connection. I think all that remains for me to say is best of luck with your application to the Innovation Awards, and please do get in touch if you have any questions. Back to you, Debbie.
Thank you, that's great. And just to say, Joanna and Andy will be featured in a breakout room shortly if you've got any specific questions. Andy, over to you, Knowledge Transfer Manager for Space.
Thank you very much, Debbie. And yeah, great presentations this morning from everyone. Really interesting to see the wealth of opportunity that's out there. I'm just going to very quickly outline a few opportunities that are open now and one that's upcoming that I think are related to this topic. So I work with a group called Space for Climate. They are a collection of about 50 or 60 UK space organisations focused mainly on Earth observation for climate, but they have an open collaboration funding opportunity, one of the streams of which is net zero agriculture. And they have a briefing event tomorrow to outline this opportunity. So it'll be a great chance to get involved with some space experts to understand whether your capability could benefit from a bit of that space data. The competition closes about a month later. So if you can't make tomorrow's briefing event, then you do have a chance to still apply. And I can connect you in with the Space for Climate folks if that's of relevance. I'll put the links to all of this in the chat in a moment as well. Next slide, please, Pedro. Then from the European Space Agency, there's a number of opportunities that they have open permanently and some that are open on a sporadic basis. So the first one, connected agriculture, is what's called an ESA Kickstart. These are small projects, 60k euros, up to 75% funding. So this one, I won't highlight all the different areas it's focusing on this time, but you can read them there. Deadline of the 31st of August. So a really interesting opportunity there to explore the use of space data in the connected agriculture area. If that's not quite fitting with what you are doing, then there's the direct negotiation. So this is permanently open calls for people using any type of space capability. That could be Earth observation, that could be positioning through GNSS, or it could be satellite communications. Apply anytime. You put in a proposal to the people at the UK Space Agency, who will review it and then invite you to fill in a full proposal if it meets the standard they're looking for. And you can apply for up to 2 million euros really for the projects you're undertaking. The amount of money you get depends on the size of your organisation as per usual application programs, and the link is there. Next slide, please, Pedro. I should mention as well, there's also another link I'll put in the chat, which is the ESA Global Development Assistance Programme, which is really focused on exploring the use of Earth observation in developing nations, and agriculture is one of their themes as well. So one thing that's coming up in the future is our Climate Impact Lab. So this is a programme funded by the UK Space Agency looking at how we can build climate resilience, adapt to climate change and meet our net zero targets. Next slide, please, Pedro. What we're trying to do is pull together data providers, companies with challenges. So we're looking for organizations at the moment, large organizations who have a key climate challenge, absolutely could be in the agri-tech field. Then we're going to invite SMEs to apply to solve that challenge. We're going to bring in Earth observation and other geospatial data providers to that program. You'll be able to experiment with the data. The successful applicants will come into this program for 6 months. And at the end of it, we're ideally creating prototypes, which will then be investable by either private sector or the public sector to take them to market. Next slide, please. We've invited a number of these data providers listed or shown here. We've actually got 16 partners now in this lab. So all providing their data, tools and expertise to help people innovate quickly over that period of 6 months. And the final slide, I think, Pedro. Yeah, get in touch with myself and my colleague Luca to learn more about any of those opportunities. I'll put them in the chat now. Thank you. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Andy. That was brilliant. And yeah, we'll follow up with more links. If anybody feels that they've missed something, they want to speak to anybody, drop any one of us a line. I'm wanting to crack on with this breakout session just because I'm conscious one or two speakers are a wee bit limited on time, and to get the best, I really want to get the best out of this session. So I think, Jess, if we're pretty much there, if I can just highlight to everybody, There will be 5 breakout rooms, and they are broken out as follows. So if there's a specific presenter that you have a question for, please assign yourself into that breakout room. You are able to move about as well. So if you go into one room, but you're thinking, I actually want to go and just waiting on Pedro coming back with the final slide. I hope you all found that interesting, and thank you. So many of you have stayed on. So really hope that you found this useful. Lots of conversations at my end. There's definitely, I think, a lead-on event or topic or discussion to be had from this morning. Just like to say thank you to all our presenters. Found it so interesting and varied. Thank you to all attendees. Thank you to everybody from KTN that's got involved in today. It's been really, really fantastic. So from Debbie and I, from Pedro and I, all the best. And again, just to highlight that if you would like to join the LinkedIn group, you can do so via that link there. But we'll leave it there for the moment. Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
everyone. Bye-bye.